In this video, we'll be learning on how to plot points. So let's start off with this problem. Plot the following points. We have point A, and it has the coordinates 5, 5. So your coordinates or your ordered pairs are going to be written in this formula, x, y. So the first value is always x, and the second one is always y. So this one's x, and this one's y. Now, for your axis, the one that's horizontal, the one that goes from left to right, that is your x-axis. And the one going up and down is your y-axis. So here, for point A, it says the value of x is 5, and the y value is 5. So your x value is going to be 5, which is right here, and your y value is going to be 5. So they're going to meet up right there. So we can write a point right there, and we can label it point A. Now, how do we plot point B? Point B has an x value of -5/2 and has a y value of +3. We can write this order pair and simplify the -5/2 to -2.5, then comma 3. -2.5 is in between -3 and -2. So we can say that the x value for that is going to be in the direct middle of -3 and -2. So it would be right here. And then we have to go up to +3, which is right here where we went. And then where those two lines touch is where the point's going to be. So it's going to be approximately right here. And that's going to be point B. Now, what about point C? Point C has an x value of -5.8 and a y value of -3. -5.8 is closer to -6 than it is to -5. So we want to make it look closer to -6 than -5. And then -3 has a direct value for it. So these lines are going to meet up about right there. So it's going to be about right here, and that's going to be point C. Now for point D, it has an x value of 4.5 and a y value of 1. So 4.5 is going to be in between 4 and 5. And 1 is going to have a value of 1. So these lines are going to meet up about right there. So it's going to be right about here. So that's going to be point D. Now for point E, it has an x value of 5 and a y value of 0. So the x value is 5, which is 5, that exact value. And the y value is 0. So whenever your y value is 0, or your x, it's going to be in between +1 and -1. So it's going to be right here where I'm circling in. That point right there has the coordinates of 0, 0. So your x is 0 and your y is 0. That is the middle of your graph. And that's called the origin. So here it has a y value of 0 for point E. So it's going to have the same y value as the origin. So it should line up with the origin if we do it correctly. So your point has an x value of 5 and a y value of 0. So your point is going to be right there on +5. And we're going to label it point E. Now for point F, it has an x value of 0 and a y value of 5. So if it has an x value of 0, it's going to have the same x value as origin, the point in the middle. And it has a y value of 5. So your point is going to be right here on +5 for the y. That's going to be point F. And notice that it lines up with the origin with respect to the x value. Now for point G, it has an x value of -7 and a y value of 0. So the x value is going to be for -7. So it's going to be at this point right here, and then we have 0 for the y, so that means it stays where it's at. It doesn't move up or down. It's on this axis. So that's going to be your answer. Now for point H, it has an x value of 0 and a y value of -9. So if it has an x value of 0, it's going to stay in the middle with regards to x. So x is not going to move left or right. It's going to be the point is only going to move up and down when we try to graph it. So it stays in the middle for x, and then y, it goes down to -9. So that's going to be your answer. Now let's try another set of points. So let's start off with A. We have -3, -7. So we go to -3 where x is, and then we go down 7, or we go down to -7. So we gotta go right here. This is where it meets up. So we plot the point right there. Let's try to plot the point B. So point B has an x value of 1.3 and a y value of +2. So 1.3 is going to be in between +1 and 2. And it's going to be closer to 1 than it is to 2. And then the y value is 2. We know that value where it's going to be. So your point is going to be about right here. That's going to be point B. Now for point C, this is a little tricky. Some of these numbers you might not know the full value for, but we can figure out where it's going to be in between. So pi is one of those values where it goes on forever. So the first 3 digits are 3.14 and so on. The square root of 10, if we want to figure out where it's going to be in between, we have to know our square roots, our perfect square roots. So we know that the square root of 16 is 4. And we know the square root of 9 is 3. So the square root of 10 is in between 16 and 9. So we can say that the square root of 10 is going to be in between these two values, 3 and 4. So for our x, it's going to be 3.14. So 3.14 is going to be closer to 3 rather than it is to 4. And then the y value is going to be in between +4 and 3. It's going to be closer to 3 since square root of 10 is closer to square root of 9 than it is to the square root of 16. So your point is going to be approximately right about here. That's going to be point C. Now for point D, it has an x value of 0 and a y value of 8. So we're not going to move left or right. We're going to stay straight down the middle for our x component. And our y value, we're going to move up 8. So we're going to move to the value 8 for the y. So your point is going to be about right here. That's going to be point D. Now for point E, we have a value of -5.5 for the x and a value of 0 for the y. So for our x value, we know that -5.5, that's in between -6 and -5. So our x value is going to be in the middle of that range. And then our y value is 0, so we're not going to move up and down. We're just going to stay in the middle for our y value. So your point is going to be about right here. It's going to be point E. Now, for point F, it has an x value of -8 and a y value of +4. So we're going to move to -8 for our x, and then we're going to move to +4 for our y. So your point is going to be about right here. That's going to be point F. Now for point G, it has an x value of 9.2 and a y value of -7.8. So our x, we're going to move to 9.2, which 9.2 is going to be in between 9 and 10, but it's going to be closer to 9 than it is to 10. And then we're going to move down to -7.8, which that's going to be in between -7 and -8. But it's going to be closer to -8 than it is to -7. So your point going to be about right here. And that's going to be point G. And for point H, we have an x value of 7 and a y value of 5. So we move to 7 for our x, and then we move up to 5. And your point is going to be right here. It's going to be point H.